Attitude is literally everything. If you can have a good attitude when you're having a crappy day, then by all means, what can stop you? You know what time it is. It's time for another episode of Getting After It. Guys, I'm excited about this. Couple updates actually about the show. So first and foremost, this is going to be a bi-weekly show. And that's something I'm really excited about because it's going to make me, test myself. But one thing that I really want to focus on and provide value to you guys is bringing on a guest to share their story. And I've mentioned so many times how getting after it is not just a phrase that I say, and it doesn't have to be anything like physical or anything like that. The thing that I want to emphasize with what getting after it means is that you're just getting after life. And that could look different for so many other people. So for example, I might bring on guests who are moms or guests who are rock climbers, just random things. I don't know. But point is, everyone has a story. Everyone is getting after something, and that message can be inspiring to one person. So I'm trying to open it up that way, trying to branch out and see if I can test myself and bring on guests as much as possible. So with that said, if you are interested in being a guest at all, by all means, hit me up. Let's have a conversation. We'll just make it fun, light going, pretty easy. But the point is, let's just keep branching out. And I want to provide you guys more insight into different people's lifestyles and how they're getting after life in their own aspect. So that's kind of the point of why I'm doing it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I'm excited for it. The other part that I want to mention is Thursday is going to be the other episode that I'll be launching every week. Mostly it's going to be a solo episode. And so that's going to be things that I'm interested in at the moment, topics that are relevant to me, things that I've learned that I want to share with all of you. And so it's going to be more of like a educational kind of conversation, but doesn't mean it's not going to be fun, because that's one thing I want to make sure, like, this is a good podcast and it's not something that's just boring to listen to. And sometimes I feel like I can be that way, but you know what? Whatever. You're listening right now, and that's all that matters. And going into what am I going to be talking about today? So I got this idea. I was talking to my wife, and I am actually in the process of writing my first book. And it's a long process. I don't know if you've ever decided to write a book, but it's kind of hard. You get writer's block. It's a real thing. So I'm learning about all these little nuances that I never really considered before. But I am writing a book, and this book is about something that's very, very important to me. I've talked about it so many times on this podcast, but the book is going to be about discipline and consistency, which I have come to understand are the two fundamental principles for any kind of success in anything that you do. That could be your job. That could be your fitness. That could be your family relationships. Could be your religion. But if you're not disciplined and consistent with the things that you're trying to accomplish, I've seen that prevent you from reaching your goals, prevent people from reaching their goals. And discipline and consistency are two principles that I think are very hard to apply. They're hard to apply because I've been on both sides of discipline and consistency. I know what it's like to be a slob, and I also know what it's like to be very disciplined. There's a balance in between that, and that's where I feel like I am at right now. Not too disciplined to where it's too rigid, but also not too laxed to where I'm still reaching the goals that I say I'm going to. And it's taken me years to understand this. I started developing this mindset in college, I would say, when I really first realized that I needed to take life seriously. I started getting a little bit more disciplined with my studies because I started realizing that no matter what, it's all on me. The things that I'm trying to accomplish, it all falls on my head. And if I'm the one that's not studying or preparing for my tests, for my job, for my fitness goals, if I'm not the one that's stepping out and doing that, how am I going to reach my goals? Because no one else can do that for you. You could have someone take a quiz for you. You could have someone show up at your job and fill up your spot for the day. But the thing is that doesn't last. And you have to realize that if you want to achieve greatness in your life, if you want to be successful, you have to find that inside of you. You have to find the reason why you want to push yourself. And you have to find the reason why it's important to you. That's a long story to tell you that the reason I want to write this book is because I am learning these lessons throughout my life that I wish I would have known when I was 18 or 16. I wish I would have known some of these things about discipline and consistency and what it's like to face challenges head on, because those are some of the most important lessons that I've dealt with in my life. And they're hard sometimes, honestly. Like, you can't tell me that you've gone through an easy phase of your life where you had to exercise discipline, you had to exercise consistency, and say that it was easy, right? Like, the reason why discipline and consistency are hard to harness are because they're very difficult to practice. But if done right, and if done on a regular basis, you will realize that it's not as bad as you actually think. And the first chapter that I want to kind of just outline, so this is going to be episode 1 of a 12-part series. So every Thursday I'm going to be releasing kind of like my working chapter of the book. And chapter 1 is going to be the bedrock of success, which is exactly what I'm talking about, discipline and consistency. And we'll go into it a little bit more here. But I want to open up with a quote from Aristotle, who is a Stoic. I think he's a Greek Stoic. But he says this: "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." That's pretty wise stuff from Aristotle there. But it's true. Like, if you are repeatedly what you do, and you're someone who loves to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos, then that's your habit. That's who you are. And you might have to make some changes. And if you want to be excellent, if you want to be someone who is looked at as admirable or anything like that, you're going to have to do some self-reflection and figure out what you want to be. Because if you want to be that guy that sits around and eats Cheetos on the couch, then that's fine. That's your life, and that's how you choose to live it. But there's so many other people out there who just don't understand that they are capable of so much more. And the only way that they will know if they are capable is by practicing discipline and consistency. And you have to start small. But I want to define discipline as the practice of training oneself to act in accordance with the rules or norms to achieve long-term goals. So think about that for a second. So discipline should be focused on long-term goals, particularly in the context of personal growth. It's about making the choices that align with your own aspirations, regardless of your emotional state. Good example of this was this morning. It was one of those days, you wake up and you're like, okay, well, I know I need to go to the gym. That's what I said I'm going to do. And you try and just get yourself out of bed. No matter what you try and do to yourself, there's no way you're waking up, right? You're just in this groggy state, walking around in the pitch black dark, trying to find your clothes for the gym, all this stuff, right? And that was me today. I was struggling to find some energy to go to the gym. But my coach texted me and said, "Hey, you have an 8-mile workout with some legs." And I'm training for an ultra marathon. With that long-term goal in mind, I know that if I miss days, it's going to be harder when race day comes around. And so it's forgetting that emotional state of, man, I'm so tired. I just want to crawl back in bed. Like, I can't tell you how many times I told Allie this morning, I just want to go to bed. Like, I don't want to go, with just like the slightest hope that she'd be like, well, why don't you just go back to bed? But she knows my goals. She knows how I am focused on all these things. And so she's like, She didn't say any of those things, which shout out to Allie. I love you for that. Thank you so much. Don't ever let me be weak. Thank you. Anyways, this morning was so hard. Like, I did not want to get up and go, but I realized that the long-term goal was more important to me than an extra 30 minutes in bed. Because I also knew that if I didn't go to the gym, it would be on my mind all day long. I wouldn't have as good of a day. I'd probably be even more groggier as I got to work. And then who knows, my whole day could have changed. But I decided that that was my goal, and I was disciplined enough to stay to it. So think about discipline in terms of the long-term goals. Like anything with your personal growth that you want to focus on, whether it's fitness, if you want to read more, if you want to learn, if you want to improve your relationships, think of these all as long-term goals. And it's going to take a little bit of time for you to understand where you can be more disciplined in your life, and that's okay. Be patient during this time. But discipline is not a punishment. I think oftentimes discipline is marked as this negative thing that lots of people hear, and they're like, oh, I don't want to be disciplined. Like, that means I'm going to get punished. No, that's not true. Because discipline is more of an empowerment. Because you're telling yourself that whatever goal you set for yourself is more important than the alternative. The reason you want to be disciplined is because you want to change. And if you're changing so you can be a better person, that should be more motivating. That should be empowering to you. And you should take that and take pride in that and be like, you know what? This is hard. Being disciplined is hard. But I know I'm going to become better for it. And because I'm going to become better for it, I can take whatever comes my way. So it will take practice. I will say that. But on that same note, start small. I'll talk more about that in a little bit here. But moving on to consistency. So consistency is the key to turning your goals into achievements through regular disciplined action. And what I mean by that is that if you are consistently working towards your goal and disciplined enough to stick to it, then that is how you turn your goals into achievements. I talked a lot about my preparation for the sub-3 marathon that I ran. Wow. I ran almost a month ago. That's crazy. But I talked a lot about the preparation that went into that. And it was months. It was like hours on the treadmill, just doing the same thing every single day, it felt like. And it was hard. Like the time that it took to prep for that was really just intense. And I know I'm just circling around here, but it was difficult. And it didn't start out with like 18-mile runs, right? It wasn't like my coach wasn't just making me go on 20 milers on the weekend, but it was a gradual build up into that. And what I'm trying to get at here is you will see that as you start to practice consistency, as you start to be more disciplined with your goals, you will see a compounding effect take precedent into your daily habits, which ultimately will fuel your personal and professional growth. So start small. That would be my first step to exercise discipline, start practicing consistency, is just starting small. Because if you go all out, you're going to burn out, and that long-term goal is going to be only that, a long-term goal. Because until you decide for yourself that you want that bad enough, then you'll start exercising the discipline. But in order not to get burnt out, I suggest you just start as small as you can. Good example of this is if you want to start going to the gym more, just go and show up. There's a really good example of that in Atomic Habits, which is actually in the next section we're going to be talking about is habits. But Atomic Habits, James Clear, the author, talks about the story of a man who he wants to go to the gym more. He wants to lose weight. And he had some serious gym phobia. Like he didn't want to go there and get judged by other people or anything like that. And so what he did is he just went to the gym, and as he walked in the door and then walked right out, pretty much just trying to get into his head that he was a person that would go to the gym every single day, even if it just was for 5 minutes like he was doing. But eventually that turned into him going and staying for 15 minutes and then staying for 30 minutes and then exercising pretty hard for a while. And now James Clear talks about how his entire life changed because he made these small choices that transitioned into this exponential growth. And the same thing goes for you. And what I want to talk about for a second is something called the habit loop, which is what James Clear talks about in that book. But habits are formed through three things, is what he says: a cue, a routine, and a reward. He also says it could be a trigger, action, or satisfaction. So those three things. But think about that. So a cue. Now, that might be something like, like you put your gym clothes out the night before you want to go to the gym to cue in your mind to give you that mental image that you're going to be going to the gym, right? A routine, the action part of that would be waking up and putting it on. And the reward or satisfaction, you could say like, I'm going to get a protein shake after I go, or whatever you want to say to that. But the important part is the reward and the satisfaction piece. And I know I've actually talked a lot about this recently, and like celebrating the small victories and focusing on the accomplishments that you're reaching on a day-to-day basis. Because when you do that, it actually opens up your mind to be like, I am progressing. It might be a slow moving trail, but I'm moving forward. And that's super important to recognize. I was really bad at this before I started dating Allie, and she's helped me so much understand that it's important to be your own biggest cheerleader. It's a lesson from her dad that she just emulates every single day, but you have to be your own biggest cheerleader. You have to be the one that's celebrating your goals just as much as, your mom would if you told her. If you went up to your mom, you're like, Mom, I've been going to the gym for 30 days consistently. She'd be pumped, and you should too. That's the point, is you have to be proud of the things that you're trying to accomplish so you can just keep going through the process. And it's one thing to understand, like, I have a long-term goal. I know it's going to take me a year to get there. Like for me with this book, it's going to take me a long time to write this thing. But something that I've been doing every day is I just say, okay, no matter what, I'm going to write 200 words a day. And sometimes I'll go back and read that and be like, what the hell did I just write? Makes no sense. And the point is, though, is I did it. And I am proud of myself for just at least sitting down and being dedicated enough to the process. That's the other thing I want to mention is consistency and discipline. You look at it as a process, because if you can understand that it's not a end all be all thing, you'll never achieve full discipline or full consistency. It's a process to get there. If you can understand that, then you'll have a lot more grace with yourself when things do slip up, or if you're not feeling like you're progressing to where you need to be. And just practice that habit loop. Find things that you want to accomplish. Maybe you want to have a cleaner house. And so something you could do is like put a duster out, and anytime you see the duster, go clean something. I don't know. Bad example, but just saying. Create these cues for yourself and figure out what routines you need to do to accept that reward. And just try it out and let me know what you think about that. But the habit loop, last thing I want to say about that is it just has to be supported by discipline and consistent efforts. So again, there's those two words, which is why I'm writing a book on this, because it's very important. Something to keep in mind, though, is that when you are going through this process of like understanding what you want to be better at, you're going to realize that obstacles are going to be coming your way. Going back to like my sub-3 marathon training, I knew that there were going to be days when my knees hurt, or my foot hurt, or my ankle hurt, or my body was so sore I didn't know what to do with it. But no matter what, like, you have to understand that these are going to be obstacles. If it was hard, everyone would do it. But since you're going after it, understand that it's okay to take it easy. when obstacles come out or come your way. And I don't mean take it easy, like step back on your goals, but what I mean is like be nice to yourself because these challenges are going to come up. And there's this quote I love from, I don't know, I heard it on the Nick Bear podcast, but he says, you have a plan and God laughs, and you make a plan and God laughs, pretty much saying like, you can plan all you want, but things are going to go wrong anyway. And that's not a bad thing though, because during these obstacles, during these challenging times, this is where the growth occurs. This is where the mindset of believing that your abilities can be developed and you can grow and you can become better. It's going to take hard work and dedication, but the thing is when challenges arise in your life, and that could be at work, family relationships, anything. If there's a challenge, an obstacle in your way, then by all means, don't get mad at yourself, but figure out what steps that you can take to overcome it. Now, I've talked a lot about my brother Drew on this podcast and how he's becoming a pretty good runner. He's actually having me coach him, which I'm pumped on. It's fun. So shout out to Drew. Nice work. But he was telling me this story the other day. And this dude, he's always told me how much he struggles with food, the temptation of food, anything like that. But he was telling me, he's like, yeah, we were celebrating this big party at work. They brought in all these delicious pizzas. I was picturing like, the cheese is pulling 5 feet away, all that stuff. And he's telling me this, and he goes, but I didn't eat it at all. I knew what my long-term goal was, and I didn't touch it. And I was pumped because I knew that was an obstacle for him. I knew that was going to be a challenge. Like, it's not easy to be the only one not eating food at a work lunch or anything like that. I've done that so many times, and I think I might have shared on this podcast how I've been made fun of just because, like, I sometimes don't want to go eat tacos in the middle of the day and get grease all over my hands and feel bad for the rest of the day. So I've been made fun of, and I knew my brother was probably going to face some of that too, but his goal was more important than the brief satisfaction for a pizza. Again, his goals are going to be different than yours, but the point is he overcame the obstacle. There's a few things that I have learned about obstacles that I just want to share about, like, how to overcome them. I think there's a few steps that you can take from this. So the first one would just be embrace the challenge. And embracing the challenge is difficult. It's hard to look at a difficult situation, a tough situation, and say, you know what, this is what I asked for. I want to grow. I want to get better. This is exactly what I asked for. Like, that's hard to accept. But if you're looking to grow, if you're looking to get better in whatever capacity that might be, then that's a challenge for you. And embrace that challenge and say, okay, what can I learn from this instead? And that'll help you just at least reframe it a little bit, give you a little more positive outlook on it rather than be scared of what is next to come, right? So just understand that. Like, if you can learn how to embrace the challenge, embrace the suck, whatever you want to call it, and find the silver lining in some piece of it, then I guarantee you'll have a better attitude going into it. Attitude is literally everything. If you can have a good attitude when you're having a crappy day, then by all means, what can stop you? There's this Alex Hormozy quote that I love that he says, if you can be in a bad mood for no reason, you could be in a good mood for no reason. So change that. Like, you have the power to change your mind and change how your perspective on obstacles is. My wife was telling me that when she was running her marathon, she couldn't open up her little pouch to get her gels out because her hands were frozen. But she didn't let that stop her. Like, she's like, whatever. Okay. I guess I'm not having gels. That's fine. But she kept going towards her goal. She knew what was more important. And I think there's power in that. The other thing I would say is, like, just be persistent in the face of setbacks. And so if you ever are beat down, let's say you fail. Let's say you have a goal of let's say you have a goal of going to the gym every day. You miss one day. Dang it. What are you going to do differently? And maybe, you just keep going. You show up the next day and you're doing good. Then you get back in the routine. Then dang it, you missed another day. And you're like, I just want to go every single day. And the thing is though, like if you go and you miss a few more days or whatever, and you tell yourself, well, maybe I'm just not someone who goes every day, then that story is going to play over and over in your head. Instead, you got to be like, man, dang it. I missed another day at the gym. You know what? I got this next time. I could do this. I could do hard things. But be proud of your efforts. That's the next part I want to focus on. Like, you need to see effort as the path to mastery. You'll put forth more effort sometimes than you will in other times. You'll feel like 100% on some days, when other days you'll feel 25%. But the important thing is that your effort, if you're able to give 100% on every single one of those days, even when you feel like you're 25%, but you're showing up and you're giving 100%, then you'll be able to make strides towards your goals that you've never thought possible before. Because I've seen that in my own life. There's days when I show up to work when I am like tired from a workout. I don't know, maybe didn't eat that morning. I'm feeling a little weak. And if I can show up and just be my best self, I will leave that day probably still tired, but feeling a lot better about what I was able to accomplish. I love the analogy of looking at your life as a movie character. And so if you take, like, this is going to be a weird thing, but I'm sure you've heard this before. If you take your life and you look at it as if you were the main character of a movie and you're watching that movie, how would you want the main character to act? Would you want him just to go and slump over his desk when he's feeling like 25% and just sit there and just get through the day until 5 o'clock rolls around, then you can go home and take a nap? Or on those days when you're 25%, would you rather watch a movie where the guy's going out and he's getting everything that he needs to get done, still feeling like 25%, but he's still showing up because he's disciplined? And that's the other thing I want to mention too, is as you start becoming more disciplined, as you start becoming more consistent, on those days that you are 25%, you'll find it's a lot easier to actually show up and perform because you've already built up those habits to become the person that you're trying to become. It takes a little bit of time, but there's a lot of resilience in that. And resilience is a key to discipline because there's going to be days when you feel like 25. But if you're able to just keep going, you'll be resilient. One of my favorite stories about resiliency is just anyone who runs the Team Tim race. Like, especially first timers, like they'll come to me and they'll tell me how they're like, oh man, I never imagined I'd be running marathons or half marathons, but look at me now. Like, I'm doing great. And then they'll always tell a story, be like, during the race, had pain in my body that I never faced before. And you know what? I still finished. And that's so cool to me. Like, you got to realize that you are building a story of resiliency if you're able to show up and maintain that long-term goal, maintain your perspective, and not get beat down when things don't go your way, because they're not going to all the time. It's going to be difficult. Some days are going to be harder than others. But I will tell you from firsthand experience that Jocko's right. Discipline does equal freedom. Because if you're able to be disciplined in every area of your life, then you won't have to worry about failing in others. And what I mean by that is, like, a good example of this, one of the very first lessons of discipline equals freedom I learned was in college. So he came out with a book, Jocko did, called Discipline Equals Freedom. It was a field manual. But there was this one book this one section about food. And food's always something I've struggled with my entire life. I tell, little lighthearted stories here and there about Fat Brett or whatever stories like that. I'll talk about Taco Bell all the time. Shout out to Taco Bell. But he came out with this book called Discipline Equals Freedom. And there was little snippet about food. And in it, he pretty much just says, if you're disciplined enough to not eat that donut, you won't have to work off that donut. And in my head, I was like, okay, that's a simple math equation. If I don't eat that 500 calorie donut, I don't have to burn off 500 calories in the gym. So that's a little freeing. I'm going to go eat some goldfish instead, or pretzels. I don't know. Just thinking. But there really is power in that. If you're able to withstand the temptation of, highly palatable food, or food that isn't healthy but tastes so good, if you're able to withstand that temptation, then you'll feel so much better, one. And two, you won't have to feel like you have to work off whatever. Or oftentimes I know there's a lot of guilt associated with overeating food and stuff. Guess what? You're not going to have that guilt if you're disciplined. And same thing goes for I don't know, you could even say bad example. Never mind. I won't go into that one. But just realize that it's going to take some time to understand these principles and where you can incorporate them into your own goals. A couple things that might be helpful to identify is your time management and productivity when you do the things. So prioritization is very important with the things that you're trying to be disciplined in. And actually, prioritization in itself is a form of discipline, because you have to say no to some things, right? You have to say yes to the things that matter most. And that's probably your family, your job, your health, hopefully, and then your religion, if you're religious. But you need to prioritize first. And that's the first exercise of discipline, because you have to understand what you want to focus on first. You have to understand what goals you want to pursue the most and prioritize them accordingly. Something that you might need to look up, because I'm not going to be able to explain it here, is the Eisenhower matrix. If you're looking to maybe find a little better way that you can prioritize your life. But really what the Eisenhower matrix is, it's just a way to categorize your tasks based on urgency and importance. So it's 4 boxes or 4 quadrants, whatever you want to call them. You could call the first box do first, and that would be your most urgent tasks. The second box would be schedule, and that's important but not urgent tasks. Delegate would be the third, and that's urgent but not important. So if you don't have time to do them, ask someone else to help. And eliminate. And that one's pretty self-explanatory. It's neither urgent nor important, so you don't have to worry about it. Don't let it cloud your mind. But prioritizing in that way at least gives you a better sense of the things that are top of mind for you and where you could best spend your efforts, where you could best spend your time, where you could best be effective with your time. All these different things. Another simple way is the ABC method, which is it's pretty similar to the Eisenhower matrix. It's just not in boxes. So you could just have a column A with must do, B would be should do, and C is nice to do. And that would be just prioritizing that way. But think about that. Just spend an afternoon thinking about the things you want to accomplish, thinking about the things that are top of mind that you need to do, put them down on a piece of paper, and then get after it. Be disciplined enough to figure out where you can be most effective with your time. So you have to realize this is your life. This is no one else's life. You want to live it the way that you want to live it. And if you don't prioritize the things that matter most to you, you're not going to live it the way that you want to. It sounds kind of out there, but it's true. If you're not able to prioritize correctly in your life, you're not living the life that you want to live. I can almost guarantee that. Because you're putting other things above your goals. You're putting other things above the priorities that you should be focusing on instead. So maintain that perspective. If you're able to prioritize your life in accordance to your goals and your desires, it'll be a lot better. I just went through this process. Last November, I didn't know what my priorities were, to be honest. I was all over the place. I was not really sure because I was trying to accomplish so many different things. And I didn't know what I wanted to spend my time on. And because of that, I honestly felt lost. I wasn't by any means lost, but I had so many things that I wanted to try and do and work on, like my marriage or my job or this podcast or my fitness because I was in the middle of training. There were all these things that were important to me, or I said was important to me, and I wasn't making time for them. I wasn't putting in the honest effort that I should be. But what's changed is I've had to start saying no to a lot of different things, a lot of things that could be good, but I have more interests in the things that I want to accomplish. And I'll give you an example of this. I told everyone at the beginning of the year that I was starting piano lessons. About 3 lessons into them, I realized that this is probably not for me. There's other things that I'd rather be doing, like writing a book, like focusing more on this podcast so I can provide you guys all better content to listen to and to learn from. And so I realized very quickly that, you know what, piano is a good thing to do. By all means, some people get a lot of joy from playing the piano, but not me, especially right now, because I want to focus on, like I said, this podcast or work or my marriage, honestly. Like that's been the biggest priority here, and it's been the best. But I had to do some self-searching, and you might have to do the same, which is why those things might be helpful to just look at. During this process of like discipline and consistency, something I would urge you to do is look for mentors who have a life that you're interested in or that you'd want to live, to be honest. Like if there's someone who you admire, go ask them what they did to get there. They're not going to shoot you away. They're going to be flattered and probably spend some time talking to you for a little bit. But you need to learn from the best. That's why I loved the last podcast I had with John LeBaron. I can finally say I work at Pattern, but the people that are at Pattern are geniuses. And sometimes I feel so inadequate being in the room with them because they'll just start rattling off numbers and start talking about data in a way that I've never heard before. Like it sounds like another language, but I'm with all these people who are just phenomenal at what they do. And I'm able to learn right from them, which has helped me understand more lessons about discipline and consistency, as weird as that might sound. And so you can learn from the best. And if you can't find mentors, then look towards social media, look to books, look to biographies, look to people that you admire and find ways that you can emulate their traits and their attributes. You don't want to become them, but if they have something that you're interested in or something that you do admire, then try it. Like, I'm not saying you have to go do these morning routines. I don't really believe in that. Because one person's morning routine will not work for you. You have to figure that out for yourself. But if there's someone who is very good at public speaking and you like that trait, maybe you could try and find ways that you could be a better public speaker. But emulate it until it becomes natural to you. Last thing I want to emphasize here is just embracing flexibility. This is another thing about discipline that you're going to have to learn. But maintaining flexibility without derailing from your goals is going to be difficult. So a few ways you can combat this is by setting flexible milestones, being open to changing methods while keeping the end goal in sight. So if one way that you, like, let's go back to the marathon example here. If I was training every single day on a treadmill and that wasn't working for me, if I would just hate training, but I loved running outside, that's a simple thing that you can change. Just say, okay, you know what? Treadmill running is not for me. Might be more efficient and easier to do in terms of just like going there and not having to worry about a route or anything like that. But it's not for me. And that's what I'm trying to get at here, is that you will learn through the process of being consistent and disciplined ways that don't work to getting you towards your goal, one step closer to your goal. This podcast has gone through so many different changes in terms of the guests that I've had on, the way that I talk to the guests. Like if you go back and listen to my very first episodes, I was disciplined in getting them out, but man, that content is rough. And so I've had to go back and learn that, you know what, just because I'm hitting upload doesn't mean it's good content. And so I've had to learn how to be disciplined in creating good content. And it takes a lot of preparation, but it's something I enjoy doing. And so I can't get mad at that. And like I said earlier, this is probably the most important part, at least with embracing flexibility, is don't be too rigid and don't be too relaxed in your goals. For example, if you say you're only going to eat 2,500 calories a day and you go over to 26, don't cut back the next day to like 21. Like, just be consistent. So if you hit 26 one day, hit 25 the next. You know what I'm saying? Like, embrace the process, give yourself some grace, and be flexible when challenges or obstacles come your way. But be dedicated enough to the end goal that you can show up, you can be disciplined, you can learn how to cultivate consistency and apply it to your life. Because I'm telling you from firsthand experience that if you're able to learn how to be disciplined, if you're able to learn how to be consistent, it will bleed into every other aspect of your life and you will become a new person. It sounds so cheesy, but it's so true. If you're able to practice this and be effective at discipline and consistency, watch what happens to you. You will become a new person and you will become so much better. And on those days when you're 25% feeling good, that discipline will kick in. That consistency, those habits, they will all kick in. And you will do things naturally. You will become better for it. I can almost guarantee that. And so take some time to think about the things that you want to get better at. Take some time to think about your long-term goals. What can you be doing to be a little bit more consistent to get there? What can you be doing to show some more discipline? Is it making more time in your day? Because if it's important to you, you'll make time. Is it saying no to the pizza at the office? Because if you want to stick towards your goals, you'll say no. Keep the end in mind. That's lesson number 1 from chapter number 1. But I appreciate everyone for listening to this episode. Like I said in the beginning, I'm really excited for this series. I'm excited to see kind of what happens. And by all means, like I said, this is kind of a test for my book. And so if you have feedback on it, if you think I should talk about something else or share some more personal stories, by all means, I'm open to feedback. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, let me know too. Shoot me a DM and we'll get something scheduled. But until that point, everyone, I appreciate you listening to this episode. Thanks for tuning in. And until next one, guys, keep getting after it.